history of Black Greek-lettered sororities dates back to the early 1900s when Alpha Kappa Alpha and Delta Sigma Theta sororities were formed among a group of women that were the top of their class at Howard University in Washington, D.C. to create a support network for women during a time of segregation and male dominance in our country. I recently sat down with 5 prominent Detroit businesswomen representing 3 different predominantly Black sororities to talk about the history, legacy, and impact on communities past and present. For these 5 women, being in their sororities is an enormous sense of pride.
My name is Jennifer Fuller, and I'm a member of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. It's wonderful to be a part of a sisterhood that has such an outstanding legacy and rich history.
I am Tiffany Douglas. I'm also a member of the Delta Sigma Theta. For me, it's really about the legacy that 22 women started in 1913, when it was hard to be educated, when it was difficult to go sit at a counter and eat. I am honored to continue the legacy and serve this community.
Kim Keaton Williams. I'm a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. The sense of pride starting when I was at Michigan State, and these women were role models to me.
Wendy Turner Lewis, and I am a proud member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So many
Joyce
powerful that started in college.
Join the meeting.
And have this bond that continues.
Service to the community is a huge mission of these organizations. With just the AKAs and Deltas combined, there are over 500,000 members nationwide and over 2,000 chapters.
There's power in having hundreds of thousands of African American women come together for a common bond of sisterhood, of excellence, and service to the community.
So whether we're standing at the Capitol or whether we're sending letters on behalf of what we think is important to our communities to elected officials, you can imagine that being that large and that broad, where the impact of Delta is felt is everywhere.
What's equally impactful, the bond of friendship and sisterhood.
We still get together for dinner, for drinks. We get together for service projects.
I was inducted with 16 wonderful line sisters, and so to this day, we're all very close.
This is a bond of people that will go on forever and always.
On a lighter note, I had to ask a couple burning questions.
Is there any rivalry between sororities?
Friendly.
Friendly.
That's friendly.
Yes, friendly rivalry. And what about the power in these colors? I mean, can Deltas wear pink? Can AKAs wear red? Or is that just like, no?
Of course.
We all look
Yes.
every color.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
I think that's the best way to say it.
The ladies went on to talk about what it means to represent their sororities in the community and to the next generation. They talked about some of the myths associated with sororities and even their initiation experiences, as well as more about what they are doing for people in need in our community, which is one of the most important things they talked about. So we are posting the entire interview under the Scene on 4 Black History.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Jacqueline Beto, and we are here with the Village in Action team. Soon we'll be introducing Dr. Otley, who you're familiar with. We've been doing this webinar series now going on 2 weeks. And at the finale of the week 1, we had our chat blazing with action. There was a student who needed some internet service, and right there on the spot, people began to donate in the chat, and it impacted that child so much that he went into his living room and was expressing to his mother, who he was taking care of, all of the things that were taking place on the chat. So removing ourselves from that week, we were very full, and now we push forward, and the Village in Action is now going to take place continuously on Tuesdays
Join the
and
meeting.
Thursdays. And we appreciate everyone who takes the time to log on. Now this evening, we will take a wonderful deep dive with some fabulous ladies, and I will begin to introduce them. I'm going to begin with the amazing Dr. Millicent Carmouche, representing Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She has a PhD in special education, and she is a graduate of Georgia State University. So welcome, Dr. Carmouche. Next, I will be introducing Dr. Kim Morton, who received her PhD in management education from the University of Hampton, or excuse me, Hampton University. Let me get it correct. And she is representing the fabulous Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Next, we have Bridget L. Lawson. She has a degree in, she's an MSW in social work and is a current doctoral student at Syracuse University. She is representing the fabulous Zeta Phi Beta Sorority Incorporated. Now, last but definitely not least, we have Leslie, the amazing Bivens, who is an actress, a retired after 24 years of the Department of Corrections. That alone is a feat. She worked the death row unit. She is currently a teacher in alternative education. She has a special needs child, or excuse me, grandchild. And we appreciate her membership in the amazing Sigma Gamma Rho Sorority Incorporated. And now what I will prepare you for this evening is that you will be impacted by the videos we will show you. So I forewarn you that the discussion we're going to engage in will touch your hearts, will impact your minds, and most of all, at the closing of this session, I will come back to make sure that these conversations are not left in the worlds of webinars and virtual reality. And so now I turn it over to Dr. Jason Otley, our moderator.
Jacqueline, I appreciate you. Could not do this without you, and could not do this without Ivan. Ivan is behind the scenes, working the sound and the videos, and so it's just a pleasure to do this work with you, Jacqueline, and you, Ivan. To our guest tonight, certainly an honor now listening to all of y'all's wonderful bios. Wow, you guys do some amazing things, and so you're all seated in different states as well. So I'm really excited that tonight our discussion won't just be in the Eastern region. I think the last couple of nights we've been in DC, Maryland, and Virginia. Tonight we're stretching out. We got some folks in the South and some folks in the deep, dirty South, as some songs talk about. But it's just simply a pleasure to have you. I want to go ahead and dive into some of these questions, though, ladies on the panel tonight. I do know that the time is almost 15 minutes after. We do want to save some time at the end for those who are joining us tonight to also ask some questions. Our audience, the chat box is open. Feel free to go in and share any comments or any resources that may come to mind. Also, if you're in the chat and you represent a Black sorority tonight and you do have some comments, we do want to mute your mic towards the end and have you share out what your organization is doing in the local region. Curious to know. So this first question, I think we're going to have all of you answer. If you ladies could just keep your first question response to maybe 90 seconds or so, and so we can move through some of these questions. We do kind of have a packed agenda tonight. And we'll just start with you, Millicent, who are representing Alpha Kappa Alpha. How has the death of Breonna Taylor, how has her death affected you and your organization? Many times, people look at Blacks to do something when things impede their community. And so interested in knowing if this death felt any different to you than some of the previous deaths and how it's affected you and your organization.
Okay, well, it's affected me in a few different ways. I'll say I am a native Kentuckian, and Breonna was murdered in Kentucky. That makes it hit a little bit closer to home because not that I don't know that there's racism and discrimination in Kentucky, I know that. But when something like that happens, I didn't grow up in Louisville, I grew up in Lexington, but something like that happens in your home state, it feels a little bit closer. My mother and my sister still live in Lexington. As a woman, it sometimes feels like the murder of Black women by police can be kind of swept under the rug. and that's hurtful. And I think that we all need to do better. We need to raise our voices for them, because there's no difference. If a Black man or a Black woman is murdered by the police, we all need to stand up. What I am proud to say is that my sorority has connected with the other 4 sororities and other women's organizations, including the Links, to start to have discussions about police reform and where we go from here. Just like these, there was a conference call I think yesterday. I was in class and I didn't get to make it on that conference call, but I am glad to see the 4 sororities linking up with other organizations that work with Black women to start to talk about what we do now, how we move forward to protect ourselves.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Millicent. Kim, it's interesting. Millicent brought up a great point, and I'm curious if you felt the same. Millicent suggested that the media just does not cover the deaths of Black women. Have you also noticed this trend, and then how did you respond to the death of Breonna Taylor?
So, so I agree with Millicent. I think that the death of Black women sort of goes unnoticed. The death of Black men sort of gets more, more folks involved, if you will. And I don't know why that is. I think now, Breonna, obviously, folks are really going out and protesting and things of that nature. But I think that, we'll talk about Sandra Bland later, but all the deaths of these Black women sort of get unnoticed, right? There's so many, they're countless, but we focus a lot on Black men, right? And not to say that Black men don't matter, but we matter too. And so I think that it's important that not only do we talk about Black men, but let's talk about Black women as well. That the sororities doing, like Millicent talked about, I know the sororities are getting together, but MPAC as a whole, they're getting together to do some police reform. Some other things that we're doing are our political awareness involvement, our gender equality, and our racial profiling are some of the we really we sort of hone in on. I know that locally our chapter helped or sort of didn't sponsor, but really got to march here in St. Louis on Sunday. And I think it's important that we protest, but let's look at what the action is after. So not only do we talk about protesting and things like that, but let's look at, like police reform, but let's look at policies in our own neighborhood or in our own municipalities and our states and our national legislation. And so I think that it's important that we not just focus on Black men, but we also focus the same as we focus on Black men.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Bridget, you're a doctoral student, excuse me. And I'm curious, in your research maybe, have you found any trends as to reasons why the media maybe portrays the death of African-American men to be more esteemed than the death of African-American women?
No, I have not. My research doesn't specifically focus on that. But I think it has to do with how we as a community come together. Part of that is we have to be more vigilant about telling our Black men to support us Black women. And I think because Black women are always on the forefront and standing up for justice for our Black youth, our Black queer people, just in general, our Black men, I think that is why a lot of times they look at us as if they're strong, they don't need as much attention, but in reality, we really do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Leslie, you've worked, you retired, I think I heard, correctional facility for 20 plus years, and you may have worked with many American men, I'm going to assume, based upon the numbers that we see in the media and then even in research. Talk about maybe some of the African-American women that you may have worked with and just the prevalence of not discussing African-American women as much in the media.
Well, I think a lot of times it's assumed that when women do crimes, it's usually precipitated by a relationship to a man, and the women themselves get pushed to the rear. So I think that when there are incidents of extreme violence against women, it's just not sexy enough for the news to pay attention to. But I also would like to point out is that as women, we're so trained to worry about violence and harm outside. So while, you know, at this point in time, I'm a big advocate of taking all of your rights that are afforded to us. You know, we all have the right to bear arms. And while we're all saying, this is your right, this is your Constitution right, when we're in our home, in your bed sleeping, that's the last place you're looking for violence to come into your home. We're so busy worried about domestic violence that's already there, that when it's coming from the outside, we're caught totally off guard, so that when we cry out, society's just not ready to hear us. And it just doesn't happen enough. Not that we want it to happen more, but it's just not popular. It's not a hot button topic. So that, you know, when it happens, it's just not as popular, it's not as prevalent, because we're considered strong. You know, like the other lady said, oh, they can handle it.
Yeah.
Everyone's just used to us handling it. And it speaks to the level of mental care that we just don't have in our societies for us.
Mm-hmm. Speaking about the deaths, the prominent deaths that we've seen go viral, the deaths of African-American men, Millicent, curious to know the brutal death of George Floyd, and when you listen to the video, you do hear him calling out to his mother. And for those who don't know, his mom had passed away. How has that changed the way you either engage with your own children, your nieces, or even children in your organization's program?
Well, I'll just talk about how it changes how I engage with, I have a 19-year-old daughter. I don't get to hold her hand every minute anymore. She's gone away to school, and I almost feel like COVID has been a blessing, because she's been here with me, having my hands on her all the time. The thing is that we know when we send our Black children out into the world, they're not as safe as white children are when they go out into the world. I remember almost having a meltdown when I went to go renew our tags at the DMV, and they told me they couldn't find my insurance information. And all I could think is, what if a cop pulled my child over and they can't find her insurance information? Right. So the way that I talk to her based on George Floyd hasn't changed, because I saw a meme or something that said they think we're crying tears over George Floyd. We still haven't stopped crying the tears over Emmett Till. We're still crying about that. This doesn't really change how we talk to our Black children, because we've always had to talk to them this way. Yeah. And no, I mean, me and my mom were talking about how she still feels the trauma from learning about Emmett Till when she was a little girl. Now my daughter's feeling those same traumas in 2020. Mm-hmm. So I don't know that it has changed anything about how I deal, not only with my daughter, but the students, the young Black women and men that I mentor, because I've always had to talk to them the same way. We know that it's dangerous for them. Yeah. And a lot of times we feel defenseless to it.
Right. Kim, Millicent mentioned just the notion of protecting her daughter while she's been home in COVID. We all know that COVID will end at some point to go back. But we're not going back to normal. It'll be a new normal, right? It'll be something totally different. We've never seen this before. What advice or counsel or what wisdom are you sharing with women in your organization, young students at Washington, right, about how to protect themselves in the world that we live in?
Yeah, so I think, when I talk to our students, so I'm at a predominantly white institution, and so I talk to our students as if where we are at the institution is the real world, even though they think it's a bubble. And, how you, I guess talk to, the police, if they stop you. I know that it's even prevalent on our campus around our campus police and making sure that our Black students are sort of known, right? So they're either wearing a T-shirt or a bag or something to identify themselves. So other things that I do as mentoring students, I make sure that I keep it real with them, sort of get their understanding of what they've experienced, right? Have they been pulled over by the police? What have they done? some of the tips they should do when being stopped or something like that. Even not even by campus police, but police right off campus. We have 4 different municipalities right around the campus. So the city of St. Louis, University City, and Clayton. And we did actually have an incident where students were stopped over the summer. This past year, they were first-year students, and they were stopped because they had gone to an IHOP, and they had dashed, but it wasn't them. It was 10 students. It was, and the people had said it wasn't them. So they got pulled over. They got, they didn't get arrested, but they got walked back to the IHOP because they didn't want to get in the cars of the police officers. And then they had to walk back to campus because they were walking to the train station to get back to campus. Then they had to walk 3 miles back to campus instead of just calling, our police department to come get the students. And so it was a big, huge traumatic for our students. But those are the small nuances that happen to students when they, come to college campuses and may or may not have experience, with police. So thank God nothing happened to any of those students. However, it could have been a bad day, right? And so I think just instilling in them that they shouldn't have fear, but also sort of because the police are fearful of them, right? So they shouldn't be fearful because the police are fearful of them, and they could not come home. So to sort of comply in a sense, and it's scary. It's scary on both sides. Even as an adult, it's scary. Driving down the street and the police is behind you. You tense up and hope that this isn't your last day on earth. So I think it's scary not only for students and our children, right? But it's also scary for us as well as adults. And so I think it's traumatic all the way around. And so I think that we need to have the conversation about how police officers fear us, right? And how we also have a little bit of fear as well. So how about let's have a conversation and a dialogue around it. So, but I think the organization is really, our sorority is really involved in trying to help shape legislation. And so I think that's the most powerful thing.
Yeah. Bridget, has your organization talked about, the fears now of, the COVID has brought on due to the number of African Americans who just are dying at larger numbers than whites, but also about the brutal deaths of African Americans. Have they talked in your organization about how to mobilize each other in order to provide better opportunities or an opportunity for your organization to maybe move into school spaces and educate students? Like, what conversations are happening in your organization surrounding all of this?
I think in general, nationally, the conversations around it all, one is primarily how do you maintain your personal wellness, your mental health during this time? Because that's a huge thing right now where you have to learn how to practice self-care, have to learn how to even de-escalate, how to talk to people, because this is traumatizing. Reliving these things are very traumatizing. And then also we do have youth auxiliaries for our organization, and they're out there. Some of them, particularly in downstate New York, are out there in the front lines with their youth at the protests. They're making videos to bring awareness to racism and people who have unfortunately been killed by police. Also, in New York State particularly, we are working to repeal laws regarding fair policing. The repeal of 50-A, which acts to repeal section of the Civil Rights Law pertaining to personnel records for police, firefighters, and correction officers. So there are a variety of things that we're trying to do regarding this issue.
Yeah, that's all good things to hear about. Leslie, Bridget mentioned, trauma. And I want to kind of dive into that in your brain for a minute, your experience. I don't think we give enough conversation to discuss trauma. It's almost like when our white counterparts experience stress at work or trauma, there's all these counseling centers and opportunities for them to share the things that they go through. But our young Black girls, especially, I'm hearing are holding in a lot of the pain that they're experiencing. Have you all in your organization talked about that, talked about how to help young Black girls express some of their trauma?
Yes. So we have our auxiliary organizations for different age groups, and we try to be very supportive and mindful of the things that are going on in their communities. And we try to keep them involved and at the same time support around them so that they understand that, yes, this is the world that you are in right now, and this is the norm of the world, but everyone in this world is not against you, and we are here for you, and we feel it too. And you have to understand that as you are going through it and growing, we're going through it at the same time. For example, I was at a protest the other day, and it was kind of a unique protest because it was in a predominantly white neighborhood, and they actually read the names of all the police shooting victims, and they read the name, and then they read the last words that they said. And I was standing next to a very young person, and I just looked at him and I just started crying, because every time I hear it, I see it, it was really hard. It was really, really hard. And, you just reach out and you just want to hold their hand, because that could be them.
Right.
But you can't shelter them. And they feel it too.
Yeah. Millicent, what's the root, I think, of, the suppression of such traumatic experience? Now, in my mind, I'm assuming, and this could be a wrong assumption, I mean, you've got a doctorate degree, so you shed some light on this in your area. But I'm just assuming that we've just been through this for so long that people just think that we know how to get through this, that resilience is put into our DNA as a Black community, right? But we hurt just like everybody else hurts, right? And so if you could talk about maybe the root of why we don't have spaces to discuss this trauma, maybe we can start changing where our young girls can start coming out and talking about the trauma.
Right. One thing, and I think Kim will tell you, we've been social media friends for some years. I am a self-labeled mental health advocate. And I feel like the biggest thing is that Black people need to learn how to talk about it. We need to make sure it's not a secret. Our mental health is just like if I told somebody that my niece had bipolar disorder, it should be just like I said, my niece has cancer. It doesn't mean that that's something that needs to be swept under the rug. We need to start talking about the trauma that we face. And one of the 5 targets for national targets for Alpha Kappa Alpha is women's health and wellness. And that's one thing about, and I just think a part of that, and I know that we focus a lot on mental health, but I think we all, every Black person should feel like going to therapy is okay. Talking about your mental health is okay, because we have so many traumas that we'll never get out. I mean, we'll never get over if we're not talking about it. And it just gets mushed down. I remember Rodney King when I was a little girl. And every time something like that happens, it's just another one on top of the next, on top of the next. And if we're not dealing with that trauma, we, like I said, me and my mom, who's also a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha, we're having a conversation the other day about this trauma is maybe the reason that my mom has screaming nightmares every night since I was a little girl. I remember being a little girl having to go wake her up, like, "Mommy, wake up, you're screaming again." I mean, that could be a part of it. Like, we are just seeing trauma after trauma after trauma. And that's why I'm glad that our sorority is embracing health and wellness for in Black women. That's a big part of what we need to start taking care of. Start taking care of our mental health at all costs.
Yeah, and I want to piggyback on what Millicent said. All of our sororities are doing it. Actually, our national presidents were on a call a few weeks ago around physical and mental health awareness. And it was very powerful to see all 4 of them there, our national presidents, talking about how we need to work together as women, right, to get ourselves together. And I think, we everybody's sort of talking about trauma informed, being trauma informed. but we also need to take care of ourselves, right? We can take care of the students, we can take care of our children, we can take care of our mentees, but we need to take care of ourselves, right? Because most times busy women are the women who are mentoring other people, right? We need to take care of ourselves. And I think that it's so important that we figure out what works for us, right? What that self-care looks like. Is going to a spa, or maybe it's going to a movie, or maybe it's just shutting out social media, so what does that self-care look like? I think not only do we need to go to therapy, Millicent, we really need to dig deep, right? Yeah. We are thought of as, like Leslie and Bridget and Millicent have said, we're so strong, we got it, right? We take care of everything. We have the kids, we take care of the bills, we also go to work full time. We do all of these things, but it feels like we don't have time for ourselves to take care of ourselves. And that's
Kim, let me ask you a question really quick. So my mother's on a call as well, and she's a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. Yes. So, she I oftentimes get on her about taking care of herself first. Fine here and there to go see all the grands. She's working this project and that project. And is it a sense, Kim, of guilt that maybe Black women have been feeling to self-care and to pamper themselves? Talk about that.
So I think it's guilt. I think it's also time, right? And feeling like, okay, so if I do go somewhere, where do I take the kids? Or where do I get that time to fit it in? I think people with children on the call could talk more to that. I don't have kids, so it's all about me all the time. Anyway, but I'm just keeping it real. And all my friends know. I think that we just really need to find some time to take care of each other, right? Or if that's, hey girl, let's go do something together, right? Grab a friend, right? But I think it's really important to take care of ourselves, because not only do we have all of these deaths, right? And all of this trauma around these deaths, we also have COVID. So we've been stuck in the house, not going out, afraid to go out because we are Black people, and it's affecting Black people more than anybody else. And especially if people who have died from it, you're really not going outside. And so, that's traumatic. I've had sorority sisters who died from COVID. And, it is a traumatic experience to know that I'll never see them again because of this disease, this pandemic, right? But I just think that we just need to grab a friend, grab a cousin, go pamper, go to the nail shop, go get a drink, whatever you do, just to take some time to get away and to also meditation is great. Meditation, praying, all of these things that we can do to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves. And Mama Ali, you need to take care of yourself.
Oh, I tell her all the time, she's getting a whole lot better. She really is. Mom is getting a whole lot better. Talking about trauma, I do want to have Ivan cue up one of our videos tonight. I do want to dive into this question about trauma a little bit more. So Ivan, go ahead and cue that video.
The first Black woman to serve as American University's student government president is suing a white supremacist who orchestrated an online harassment campaign against her. Taylor Dumpson is seeking more than $1.5 million in damages from the Daily Stormer founder, Andrew Anglin, plus a follower of his for harassment that happened last spring. Anglin is also facing a similar suit filed by a Muslim American radio host.
This question, Bridget, I want to kind of just start it off with you. Taylor Dumpson, she's a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. She was the first Black woman student body president at American University. She won a case recently for $725,000. And in 2017, when she was brought in as student body president, bananas were found hanging on nooses around campus. The bananas had messages scrawled on them. One referred to Taylor and her sorority as Harambe Bait, a reference to the gorilla killed in the Cincinnati Zoo in 2016, talking about trauma. How would you counsel or embrace an African American woman who has just gone through that?
I think first off, I would definitely have a conversation about how intergenerational trauma manifests when things happen, particularly instances as such. And I would just really process with them to see how they're feeling, give them resources that they can go to on campus if it was an incident that happened on campus or in the community, and also connect them to a network of women or men who will be able to just affirm their lives, affirm their experiences, and just really give them the support that they need.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned resources, Bridget. What university are you at?
At Syracuse University.
Syracuse, okay. That's interesting. I mean, I didn't know that until just this very moment, but I think Syracuse just experienced something in 2019. There was
in 2020.
In 2020, so yeah, talk about that.
There's been a lot happening on our campus with racial incidents. There were incidents where a student was pistol whipped at an off-campus apartment, which was relatively close, and the response from the administration was very kind of like brush it under the rug. There were incidents where students were protesting because of racial epithets that were sprawled across walls and the bathrooms and the library, and the incidents just kept happening. And up until spring break, this past spring break, students were protesting. They took over the administration building. They had a list of demands that they had put out. And honestly, I believe that if it had not been for COVID-19, things would have gotten worse. The response from my institution was, honestly, it was horrible. They did not do due diligence in making our students feel safe on campus. They didn't do their due diligence in protecting our students. So I think overall, the institution has a lot of work to do. We don't have a lot of Black faculty and staff, and the Black faculty and staff that we do have, they try to put limitations on our involvement with the students in the protests, which honestly, I felt like it hurt us it hurt me as a Black staff person, but it also ultimately hurt students because they felt like they didn't have anybody to turn to.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned those incidents, Bridget. You know, even at American University, where I am now, prior to me coming, we had racial incidents that I had read about prior to arriving on campus. So I kind of knew what I was getting myself into, but was hoping that in the time that I've been there, that, you know, we can make some gradual change. But like you mentioned, when you're one of a few, it's hard, right? And you mentioned COVID, similar instances. We had an incident on campus, and maybe had it not been for COVID, things may have shifted a little bit differently. So, you know, we're the villain in action for a reason. There's got to be opportunities for us to have these conversations, but also then when we leave the call, what are we doing about those things, right? And so I think it's important that anyone who's listening on the call today, if you have a connection with Syracuse, love for you to connect with Bridget and our team after, or any of the universities that may be on the call. It is so important that our voice is heard, and so sometimes we're just stronger in numbers. Leslie,
can I add something, Bridget?
Go ahead.
Real quick, we have so I started the Black Faculty and Staff Cabinet at our university, and I'll give you some information about how you can maybe start an organization so that you guys can have a safe space.
Yeah, we have something similar on our campus, but honestly, some people are just afraid to take action because they're worried about their jobs, and I get it.
That's a real thing.
So we have something similar, but I definitely would like to hear your ideas that maybe we can incorporate with what we have.
We'll connect.
Thank you.
Yeah, very, very similar. And I think that's the fear, Kim, as you chimed in, that's the fear that we all have as Black people in predominantly white spaces. That if I say too much, then does that mean that my job is at risk, right? And so I think if we don't say enough, then we damage ourselves and our community even more. So it's this fine rope that we have to kind of walk. And I think that we're at a place now as a community, we're just tired, sick and tired of having to walk this fine rope. And so I think that, coming together like this allows us to be able to express these feelings we have, but then also develop some action behind it. Leslie, I'm curious, you're in an alternative high school, right? And I used to teach special needs students in K-12 years and years ago before I got into higher education. And there were some of my students who would get kicked out of the school and then have to go to an alternative high school, right? Talk a little bit about maybe the trauma that even exists with the students that you serve who are African American.
Well, honestly, I feel like, as Bridget was saying earlier, in terms of multi-generational, there's a lot of epigenetic DNA harm that a lot of us don't realize that we're still processing, especially in terms of women. That's why we carry so much weight, because we've been taught that we had to. And that's why I think so many of our young boys are so angry all the time, is because they don't even realize why they're angry. There's so much trauma in their backgrounds that they act out. There's not enough fathers in their lives for whatever reason, and that's a holdover from slavery too. And then they're faced with all these microaggressions every day. You wake up Black. You step outside Black, and you're looking around. You don't know why you're on guard, but you should be. You feel afraid, you feel tense, and that's hard on your body, it's hard on your mind. So how can you go to school and feel at ease enough to learn and do the things you're supposed to do when you're trying to be 3 different people all at the same time? You don't really have enough space in one human body to process all these things you need to do in order to succeed. It's hard.
Yeah.
And it's starting even younger.
Right. Speaking about being on guard and having to protect oneself, Ivan, go ahead and cue up the second video. Panelists, please pay close attention to this next video. I do have a question about how do we protect women who do have to hold on to this notion of always being on guard.
Get out of the car now.
Why am I being apprehended? You trying to give me a ticket for your failure?
Get out of the car.
Why am I being apprehended? You just opened my car door. You just opened my car door. So you threatening to drag me out of my own car.
Get out of the car.
And then you gonna stun me? I will light
you up. Get out.
Wow.
Now.
Wow.
Get out of the car.
For a failure to signal. You doing all of this for a failure to signal.
Get over there.
Right, yeah. Yeah, let's take this to court. Let's do it.
Ahead.
For a failure to signal. Yep, for a failure to signal.
Get off the phone.
On my school.
Get off the phone.
I'm not on the phone. I have a right to record. This is my property. This is my property. Sir?
Put your phone down. Right now.
You're doing all of this for a failure to signal.
Get over there. I will light you up. Get out.
Wow.
You okay?
I'm waiting on you. This is your job. I'm waiting on you. What do you want me to
Oh, you seem very irritated.
I am. I really am. Because I feel like this crap is what I'm getting a ticket for. I was getting out of your way. You were speeding up, tailing me. So I move over and you stop me. So yeah, I am a little irritated, but that doesn't stop you from giving me a ticket. So let's continue.
Are you done?
You asked me what was wrong and I told you.
Okay.
So now I'm done, yeah.
Okay. You mind putting out your cigarette, please? Don't mind.
I'm in my car. Why do I have to put out my cigarette?
Well, you can step on out now.
I don't have to step out of my car.
Step out of the car. Step out of the car.
No, you don't have the right.
Sandra Bland, who was a member of Sigma Gamma Rho, was a 28-year-old Black woman who was found hanged in a jail cell in Waller County, Texas, in 2015. And this was 3 days after being arrested during a pretextual traffic stop. And then her death was ruled a suicide. Each time I watch this video, Millicent, my heart just drops each and every time I watch this video. It also a little frustrated. Millicent, I want you to answer this question for me. I'm frustrated because the comments that I've read around her death saying that all of that could have been avoided, right? That frustrates me hearing that. Talk a little bit about how you, what you got out of that video, just watching it probably again.
It's always disturbing, especially when we know how it ended. And we know that we will never know exactly what happened to that woman. I said before we started the discussion, every time I look at it, I think that could have been me, because my mom raised me to be free, to be, say what's on my mind. That back and forth could have been me and a police officer, the same one. And she didn't deserve to die for that. So it's hard to watch. Just like, and we were kind of going back to the conversation about Black women's deaths not getting the same kind of attention. I remember, and I can't remember her last name now, the young woman, Corinne was her name, when the police came into her house and she had a gun, she was blamed for her death because they came into her house and she was trying to protect her child, and they shot her with right there. It makes me sad when I hear people saying that, well, it didn't have to happen. All they have to do was comply. No, we don't have to comply. We don't have to say everything the right way. We have the right to make a mistake just like a white woman does, because I know a white woman in that situation could have gotten out of their car and slapped that police officer in the face and still lived to tell the story. And when I think we all know that. But, I don't know. And I think the only thing we can do, I talk about I have a 19-year-old daughter. I think the only thing we can do, and I'm never going to teach my child to walk around and just be afraid all the time, because I'm not. And that's not the kind of life I want her to live. But somehow we have to, I know when she first started driving, I clipped all of her documents together, registration, a copy of her license, and her insurance, clipped together right at the top of everything in her glove box, and told her how to ask for permission to get it and all those types of things. I just don't know how we respond to this, because we can't walk around living in fear or bowing down to them for every little thing. We still have a right to be free in this world and to be defended when when wrong is done to us.
Yeah.
And and I mean, not just by other Black women either, by Black men, by white women, by everybody who sees wrong done to Black women. It shouldn't be, that didn't have to happen. If she hadn't been so iffy, she would still be alive. That's not fair. Yeah. And it's heartbreaking.
Yeah. Kim, I'm thinking about an old Lauryn Hill song. I'm dating myself. This is probably 1998. One of her songs, the verse was, "Who do I have to be to get some reciprocity?" Right? Kim, I'm curious. I mean, damn, who do Black women, how do they be themselves, right?
Right.
Out of context in that song in 98 when Lauryn Hill penned those words, because she was talking about a old lover. But in this context today, right, who do you have to be to get that reciprocity?
Yeah, it's hard to answer that, right? I mean, I think we have to be authentically who we are, right? At all times. And if we're that, then, that's all I can be is authentic. And so it's hard to live in this system, right? We're living in this system that, and we talked about this earlier, Jay, we live in this system that is not for us, right? It's for us. And do we dismantle the system? Do we, start our own? Or, what do we do? Because we're living in their system. And so until we figure out how to live together, living in their system doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So I don't know if I can really answer that question, but being authentic and who you are. And unfortunately, that may cost some lives,
Can I add something, Kim?
Yeah, you sure can.
When we say we don't know what to do now, but I have felt so, I feel overwhelmed about the protests going on now because, it's hard to look at them being run over by police cars, but I feel so encouraged that these young people are not giving up. This wasn't just a day or two. I think that this generation might be the one that forces them to make some changes because they are not stopping and they're not giving up. And I think that's what we have to do because like Kim said, the system wasn't made for us. We're going to have to make them rebuild this system at this point.
Right.
That's what has to be done. Like from today or from that day when the protest started, we are going to make you rebuild this system and we're not going to stop. And I'm old. I'm 43 years old. So I haven't been out there.
You is not old.
Right.
You is not old. Please do not say those words.
But I will say, I'm still afraid of COVID. I haven't been out there. I've been donating. I've been signing petitions. I'm so happy to be here to be able to talk about this, posting on social media. But I feel like we owe those young people so much.
Yeah.